Hi, this is Eliza Inkberry. This is your first assignment in Gothic gardening for Darkside University. And with any luck, the screencast program I am using will work correctly. And so here we go. I wanted to make sure everyone knows that we have an assignment up in the discussion section. And we've already got some replies here. I really like this night garden that's been posted, and I'm going to actually talk about moonflowers a bit. But anytime you want to do a night garden, it's a good idea to use some silver foliage, which you can see here because it reflects the moonlight better than the green. And then your white flowers will stand out really well against the dark green. And then down here, if this is actually your garden, Jay Donahue, I am very impressed that you lived through that monsoon cyclone. And we'll definitely talk about some extreme weather-proof methods that you can use, perhaps not so much in this lesson, but we're going to get to it. And I'm feeling pretty thankful that the area of the country I live in has very little natural disasters going on. So we've got some hot peppers here, and I wanted to mention while looking at this one I think is actually dark green, but maybe it's a black one, but I know of a jalapeno that's a purple one that is a really nice looking plant to grow, and there are a lot of black peppers. And here's a black orchid, which you may or may not be able to grow outside depending on what part of the country you're in. So please add your gardens to this, and I'm going to join in on this discussion and answer questions if you have them. So talking about gardening, it looks like you guys are all over the map as far as how much experience you have or not based on when I've been talking to people online. And so I'm going to touch on beginner gardening a little bit, but not too much on the how to grow things side. As you know, we're more going to talk about design and plants. About half the course is going to be design and the other half is going to be plants. So this picture of container gardens, first I want to say that I don't consider this very low maintenance. I look at this and I think that's a lot of repotting every time they get root bound, and you're going to have to fertilize those because they don't have a lot of soil. So when you see tiny pots like this, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier. The other thing is with pots, the number one thing that kills them is overwatering, and the number two thing that kills them is underwatering. You're definitely, for any kind of gardening, going for the soil consistency of a wrung out sponge. So if you squeeze a sponge really tightly and feel that after you've done that, then that's kind of the way your soil is supposed to feel, and anything wetter or drier than that is not as good unless you have a bog plant or a cacti. And the other thing is, you can see this tray right here. You're going to want to make sure that your plants are never sitting in a tray of water unless it's a bog plant or a water plant of some kind. So if you've watered and within 10 minutes there's still a whole bunch of water down in the tray right here, go ahead and empty that out and then put your plant back, because you don't want it to die from that. And you know, a really good way to check if your plants need water is to just stick your finger in up to the second knuckle, and if you can feel moisture, then you probably don't need to water yet. But if it's feeling kind of dry, then yeah, go ahead. So this is actually hydroponics, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I wanted to show this to mention that you can do something called sub-irrigated planters, which makes planting in containers a lot easier. And I guess on the design end of things, I wanted to mention that it would be very easy to change, you know, your pot colors to something that you prefer, and to, you know, switch out the color of the plants to something that you prefer. You know, black pansies, whatever you would like to try in a pot. And so with sub-irrigated planters or with hydroponics, even though I'm not that into it, if you want to really get into something where you're going to be doing a lot of chemistry and you're going to be, it's kind of high maintenance, but you're going to be adding the fertility to the water and stuff for that. But with sub-irrigated planters, you can find plants for those online, or you can buy them ready-made. And it basically has a reservoir in the bottom that mosquitoes can't get to, preferably. And it wicks the water up into the pot as the plant needs it, so that your plant is not waterlogged, but you don't have to keep up with watering it quite as often. So you could go on vacation for a couple of weeks and you're not likely to lose your plant. Or just forget to water it for 2 weeks, which is more likely for most of us. Then this is an example of a really ornamental planter. And with this, actually kind of could be a nice goth element in a pot, but if you have like a tall spiky plant, that's a very easy way to draw interest to a container plant. And then you can put a mixture of things around the edges. The larger the pot, the more stuff you can put in it without having to do a whole lot of fertilizing and watering. The more plants you add, the more maintenance it's going to be, or the smaller the pot, the more maintenance it's going to be. This is an easy way to learn gardening. If you are not already a gardener, I recommend looking up square foot gardening. And what they've done here is they've made this grid which exactly measures out square feet right here. And I'll show you in a minute how you space the plants, but if you look at this planter, you could paint it any color you want. You could paint a design on it. You could paint the frame one color and then paint the grid a different color. If that was bright purple and this was maybe a charcoal, or if that was red and this was black. And then you're going to space your plants in these little squares like this. And you can look up square foot gardening charts online if you don't want to buy the book with the chart in it. There's lots of that. And so tomatoes, you're going to have one of those per square foot, or a geranium, which ends up being kind of a big ornamental plant. You can get some nice blood red geraniums, but a lot of people feel like those look like grandma plants, so maybe you want to use a black hellebore or something instead. Most people use square foot gardening to do annual gardening, which is a plant that lives its entire life cycle in a year, or you plant it with the expectation that it's going to die in a year when it gets cold out. But you could use it for perennial gardening, and if you do that, a perennial is a plant that lives 2 or more years. Then you're going to need to keep an eye on if things are getting root bound, which is when the roots run out of places to go because they've been growing for so long, or your fertility, the soil might need a lot more care. But basically, a tomato plant, you're going to put one per square foot, and you're going to put it at the north part of your bed, or the northwest part of your bed, because you always put the tall stuff in the back. It's kind of like you're lining up a photograph with all your family, and the tall people stand in the back and the shortest people go in the front. Same thing for gardening. Your northwest corner is or north is going to be the area that doesn't shade the rest of the garden. So you need to figure that out on a compass, or look it up online on Google Maps to figure out which way your house is oriented in your yard, and then orient your bed so that tall stuff is in the back. Sunflowers, 1 per square foot, they're tall. And then the stuff in the front of that, I would actually start with, say, peppers or eggplants right here, because they're a little bit shorter than well, I don't know why geranium would be in the back, because they're not that tall. Maybe some pole beans or some moonflower, except moonflower is kind of vigorous and it might take over the whole bed. So right here, the next row up, I would put 2 foot tallish plants, 2 to 3 feet, and then they've got a pepper in front of that. My peppers always get pretty tall. Maybe they don't where you live. Oregano I would never put in a bed with a whole bunch of other stuff because it takes over the whole thing. I would give that its own pot by itself. Same thing with mint, and I would put the mint in a pot on concrete because it will escape out the bottom. Swiss chard, that's an interesting drawing for that. Yeah, I would put that there. And it's showing here that there's 4 of them per square foot. So you actually get more of a harvest of those out of that space. Although if you think about it, you're going to harvest a lot of tomatoes off of that, and it might end up being more by volume than, say, the Swiss chard. Beets, you get to put 9 per square feet. Garlic and carrots, you get to put 16 per square feet. I do the same thing with lettuce. I actually put 16, or I just broadcast the lettuce in there. and it's really really thick, and then you get your baby greens out of it. And you want, if you have a small enough garden and you have the time, you can actually carefully snip those out as you harvest your baby greens and leave 4 per square foot when you're done to become big heads of lettuce like these are. And I like to grow loose leaf lettuce because I think it's a lot easier than the round headed lettuce like iceberg, and I also think it tastes better. But you get some really dark colored lettuces. There's some amazingly near black lettuces. I know Pine Tree Seeds has a lot of them. Johnny Seeds has a lot of them. In general, Pine Tree Seeds is a good company to start with if you're a beginner gardener because they have inexpensive packets of seeds. So here is the square foot garden in practice, and they've actually put trellises here for the tall stuff to grow on, although it doesn't look like they bothered putting tall stuff in the back. But they've got a lot of dark purples and reds here, which is kind of nice. And so you can use it either as an ornamental garden or as a vegetable garden or as a mixture of both. And I like mixing both because I think that adding flowers to a vegetable garden attracts more beneficial insects, or I know it does. It's called farmscaping, and it makes it, if you have enough of those flowers, that you do not have to do any pest control. I don't know that it would work if you have like mostly lawn and your neighbors have mostly lawn, and then you're doing a square foot garden that's, 10 by 10 or something. Which you actually wouldn't want to do because then you couldn't reach into the bed from all directions. I think these must be 4 by 4. Let's look at that. Yes. So these are 4 by 4, so that the theory is anytime you have a 4-foot wide bed, you can stand on this side of the bed or you can stand on this side of the bed and still reach this middle point because your arm extends about 2 feet. If there was a fence right here, you'd want to stop at 2 feet so that you could reach in, and then your fence would be here and you could reach all the way in there and you could weed and harvest and whatever, because you don't want to compact your soil. And that's true with ornamental or vegetable gardening. Not compacting your soil is one of the things you really can make a huge difference in how well your garden grows. In general, soil is really important. It's the #1 thing gardeners can do something with, so make sure you're reading up on how to take care of your soil and you're really working on your soil. I had talked about a method of gardening in the chat that you can do to really build your soil and not have to do as much irrigation, and this is it. It's called hugelkultur, which is a German word that's kind of fancy sounding, but it means a pile of wood with dirt on top. And I want to really draw attention over at this illustration where they've got the pile of wood, and then on top there's a thick layer of dirt all the way over it. There's no wood sticking out, because I see people making these hugelkultur beds and they're becoming really popular because they work so well, and they don't bother to cover up the wood all the way, and they just don't work as well if you do that. So if you want to plant in it, you can plant in these the same day you put them in. And if you don't want a big hill in your yard, you can dig down underground. And if you scroll down on this page, what just happened? If you scroll down on this page, it will, it's richsoil.com, hugelkultur. It'll show you all of these diagrams that show you how your tree starts growing more as your wood is rotting, and then you've got this great soil food web going on with all the mycelium from the mushrooms and the bacteria, and a whole lot of rotting, and that's great. And so if you don't want to, apparently scrolling really upsets the recording that I'm doing, so I guess I won't do that. But if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see some diagrams where they're showing where people dug down into the ground and put the wood there. But if you read that, it'll tell you all about how to do it. This is another option. It's keyhole beds, and these are designed if you have a small amount of space and you want as much things as possible to plant. Then it minimizes how much paths you're using. The only reason to do a straight long row if you're growing stuff is if you're a farmer and you have heavy tractor equipment that you need to get up and down the road to plant and harvest and stuff. If you're a home gardener, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to do those long straight rows. So if you want to save space, you have your main artery path that your wheelbarrow can fit down, and that's usually at least 3 feet wide. And then again, you're going to want to be able to reach from both sides, it can be about 4 feet, but if once you have like a fence like this, you're going to want it to be about 2 feet right there. And then these tend to be about 3 feet across in the circle and maybe 1 to 2 feet across in the pathway. And you can have kind of a focal point. It could be a little pond, it could be a lot of different things. So this is a garden that I found. I couldn't find a whole lot of really good examples of goth gardens. Most of the stuff you can find is like people posing next to plants. And, you know, if you're actually trying to garden, that's not that helpful. This color scheme is very easy to do with such a wide range of plants. There's almost always a purple or a dark, almost black version of most ornamentals these days. Reds are very easy to come by. So if you have a particular plant that you're very fond of, there's a few things that, you know, I would caution against. There are no black roses unless you're spray painting them or they're dead. And even when they're dead, they turn brown. So anyone trying to sell you black roses or blue roses is photoshopping. And there's a few other things like that. And, you know, if we come to plants, I'll try to point that out if it's something that, you know, someone's trying to scam you on. But I think this is a really nice, I'm scrolling again, it doesn't like it. Sorry thing. Okay, here's an example that you could do as a centerpiece for, say, a keyhole garden. And if you had kind of a tall focal point in the middle, I like this. This is purple basil, and there's another plant called shiso. It's also called perilla. That is an herb that would be a really good option. You could do this kind of dark basil and maybe some lavender, which has silver foliage. In this square, there's, you know, you could do a kind of a wire topiary thing and then put your moonflowers on that right here. And so you'd have a nice focal point of moonflowers in the middle. A lot of options with a focal point. They're pretty fun. I don't know how many of us are going to have an ornate stone wall put in, but if you have the money or skill, why not? This looks like a clematis on here, and there are actually some very dark mauve, almost black clematis that you can use that will grow like this if you have the good climate for it, because it doesn't really like super hot summers. So in my area, clematis never gets all that large, depending on the species, but most of them, like most of the ornamental ones, don't. I'm in South Carolina, in case you didn't watch my intro video, and so we have very hot, humid summers. I liked this gate. I think that you could make something like this really easily from recycled objects, or you could find sticks that look sort of like this and maybe paint them. It doesn't look very hard to put together. And then this, of course, is very cool and looks like it would cost a lot of money to install unless you knew how to do it yourself. But if you have the means, why not? And this is a more affordable type Gothic gate, maybe not the stone wall part, but you can get things like this even at the big box stores. So if you wanted a gate of some kind that, you know, would lend that kind of hardscaping air to your garden, hardscaping being the non-plant elements of your garden. These are an easy thing to add. This is just a mirrored Gothic window that's, you know, not an actual window, and you could put them on walls if you have them, or you could just set them in your garden somewhere. And you see this one's reflecting the plant back. This is from Duncraft.com. It's a bird store, but they have a glass jewel hummingbird swing that you put near your hummingbird feeder, which is also glass and a copper bottom, and so the birds will land on it before they go to the feeder. And I liked their kind of vintage Victorian looking bottle feeder a lot. So they have some options there. And then of course you can have your garden gargoyle of some kind, or any kind of statuary definitely would lend that kind of feel to your garden. So the plants that I'm going to profile are going to be mostly easy plants. This one is black hollyhock. It's easy to grow from seed. It's related to okra and hibiscus. and also tea hibiscus if you've ever had like red zinger tea. And red zinger tea, the tea hibiscus is Hibiscus sabdorifa. That's a really beautiful plant and very deep red, and the calyxes are what you eat, and they're like blood red, and they have a juice that's red that looks like the red zinger tea, and you can dry those and use them in tea, or you can press them and make the juice into jams, and you can eat them. They get nicknamed Florida cranberry a lot because they grow in the heat, but they have kind of a sharp flavor. But the black hollyhocks, this one's a double variety, but there's a single too. They're pretty easy to grow. Some people use them as a dye. And this one has a little bit of insect damage, so I'd actually recommend that they improve their soil and make sure their soil food web is healthy, because that'll improve the health of the plant. And that includes not stepping in the beds and adding a lot of organic matter. So that's compost, and I like to mulch really heavily. And so when you mulch heavily, wood chips are really an amazing option because they're very dense, and so they break down into a lot of compost. And you never have to rake them off again. You just put them there. Hardwood is the best. Definitely don't go for things that are rot resistant like cedar or cypress, but and black locust. But you put it on, and I put mine on about 8 inches deep, and anywhere there's a plant, I leave about a dinner plate size space where I've scraped the mulch back, because you don't want mulch laying up against the sides of your plant stems or your tree trunks because it'll rot it. But if you have that thick mulch, it suppresses weeds, it holds in moisture, and it breaks down in compost right where it is. And if you don't want to keep up with a compost pile, you can take your kitchen waste and just bury it right in there. So that's my easy tips for how to organic garden and not have pests and diseases. Okay, so here's another really easy one. This is black cornflower. There's several different black cornflower varieties. They all come out kind of a deep purple, and so you can see here the kind of purple tinge to it. And they're an annual that reseeds really well. From they do here, and I think they do in even like California and stuff. It's one of those plants that's kind of grows everywhere except maybe the desert areas of the world. But it's really easy, and it's an annual that comes back every year. Or you could grow Black Knight scabiosa, which is a perennial. It's very similar. It does reseed a bit, but not much, and it's just a really pretty perennial plant that looks similar to the black cornflower. This is I think it's black dragon coleus, but there's a ton of coleus that are really dark, black to purple, some wine reds, and they're a good accent plant. They're an annual most places. I guess I shouldn't say things are an annual. Well, I mean, this one would be a perennial if you have a really mild season. But where I live in Zone 8, USDA Zone 8, it is a annual. Black calla lilies, very easy to grow. You just order the bulbs. Usually you order them in the summer in order to have fall delivery, and they're really pretty and easy to grow, and you can get some blood red ones as accents. You can get white ones as accents. There's one I really like called Green Goddess that is a green and white flowered one. It's very large, and all of these are perennials where I live in Zone 8, but depending on where you are, you might have to grow them in a pot and bring them indoors in the winter. This is Love Lies Bleeding, which is an amaranth, and I guess I should have included it in the edible section, which I'm going to get to at some point, but it's a very nice ornamental, but also an edible. And the flowers that you see here turn into grain amaranth, which you can eat, and you shake it into a paper bag and then use it kind of like you would quinoa. And then the leaves are edible as well, and you can use them the way you would spinach. They don't taste like spinach, they taste like amaranth greens, and so it might be an acquired taste, but I really, the first few times I tried amaranth greens, I was not really impressed because I was expecting it to taste like spinach, but then I got to the point where I was really craving amaranth greens for the sake of amaranth greens, and they are the best when they're really tender and young. So on Datura, I actually included a whole lot of the Google images on this because Brugmansia right here, which goes by Angel's Trumpet, is really similar to the Datura. I'm trying to remember. I'll scroll here. Devil's Weed is the common name for that, and it's, poisonous. Both the Brugmansia and the Datura, they used to be grouped together and now they've been split by botanists. You can see here, this is the Angel's Trumpet. They kind of hang down, and this is, I think it's called Blackcurrant Swirl. It's a Datura. You can grow it from seed really easily. With the Brugmansias, you're probably going to need to buy a plant. But these are both really good moon plants. The Datura has these pods that sometimes get called horse chestnuts. You can get white ones, and purple ones are kind of the main thing there. If you have pets that you're worried about eating plants, or children, you may want to get moonflowers instead. And here's a night garden arch with moonflowers on it, and then I'll show you those up close. They're very pretty. They're very easy to grow. They're a morning glory, and if your soil is good, so if you're improving your soil and adding a lot of organic matter, and if it's not too wet or too dry, then most of the time these things will grow so well that they can even become weedy in some areas. I don't have a problem with moonflowers becoming weedy where I live. I mean, they will reseed a little bit, but it's not too bad. I have a real problem with morning glories where I live, and I won't plant those because they kind of grow like kudzu around here. This moth right here is in the hawk moth or sphinx family. It's the same thing. It's a tomato hornworm or a tobacco hornworm, a moth from that. And so there's a lot of sphinx and hawk moths that don't also eat your tomatoes and other plants, but this one happens to. It's a really big moth. This is a huge flower, and you can watch them open at night. It's really cool. They smell really nice too. This is a purple dragon carrot. Carrots used to be purple and white, and then somebody figured out how to breed them orange. They actually did it because it was the royal colors. I think that was a Dutch I can't remember, but they bred them to be orange, and then that took, and now people don't know that carrots used to be different colors, but that's actually coming back. So I've actually even started to see them in grocery stores this way. Probably in California they've been that way for 10 years, but on the East Coast not as much. This is one of the ones that I feel like is kind of a scam on some of the goth plant websites I was trying to look through. Every time I see this tomato come up over there, they have them all on the plant beautiful black and shiny, but this is indigo rose tomato, and this is how they actually look off the plant. There's a variety of color. I kind of like it. They're not the tastiest tomato, to be perfectly honest. They're pretty good. They're not grocery store bad, but they're not delicious. If you want a black tomato that really tastes good, it's really more purple, but I would recommend Black Krim or Black from Tula as two of my favorites of those. And we'll actually get into some more really cool weird tomatoes as we go on. And here's another nightshade option if you really want that black look, and this one's cool because it's edible and it looks really similar to deadly nightshade. But this is a sunberry, and they're delicious. I've eaten tons of them. I have not had any ill effect from it. You can get them from Vessi Seeds. I recommend getting them from Baker Creek heirloom seeds because they have so many other plants you're probably going to be interested in. They have a lot of really unusual stuff. They travel around the world to try to find weird things. So definitely check out Baker Creek heirloom seeds. But these very cool looking, and they only get about 1.5 feet high, and they usually reseed for you, so you don't even have to keep planting them every year. And they taste really nice. They're sweet. And there's, kind of a hint of tomato to them, but they don't actually taste much like tomatoes. This is another one that's not actually a myth, but you can get blue potted peas, and I have no idea how to pronounce their actual name. I can see why they're being sold as blue potted. This name right here looks pretty hard to do, but if you pick them when they're really young, and not puffed out yet, then they kind of taste good as a snow pea, but they're actually a soup pea. And so they're intended to get fully ripe and dry, and then you reconstitute them to make soup with. So they get kind of tough quickly. This is a bean that I really like called rattlesnake. And I like this one because it is a pole bean and I like to save space in my garden. So this would be one, say, that you would grow at the back of the garden because it's going to be tall and you grow it up a trellis. And you know, it might be really cool if you did like a Three Sisters where you had the you could grow maybe black sunflowers or a dark blue or black corn or red, like a bloody butcher corn. Bloody butcher is a really great corn, but it's a better flour corn than it is a sweet corn, and it has bloody red kernels. But you could grow that with this climbing up it, and then you could grow a black squash at the base of it, and so you'd have like a Goth Three Sisters planting, which is a traditional Native American planting. And I guess I'll go ahead and go into the reason it's done that way is the beans are nitrogen fixers, so they fix the nutrient that plants need the most on their roots with a beneficial bacteria. So they're symbiotic with the bacteria, which is kind of cool. And the sunflower or corn acts as a trellis for it, and the squash shades the soil to keep the moisture in, and that's why they work so well in company with each other. And in traditional times, people leave it out, but they used to grow cleome with that, which is a type of flower, and there's some really nice white ones that would be good for moon gardens. They're also pretty weird looking. They get called cat's whiskers and some other things because they're very strange spider. They get called spider flower too. So they have these weird kind of whiskery things that hang off of them. This is a great bean if you live somewhere with a hot and humid summer. This is yard-long beans. This particular one is red noodle that's sold through Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds and Johnny's Seeds and a few others. And they're really pest and disease resistant. They're very prolific. The beans really sometimes do get as long as 3 feet. They're better when you pick them when they're about the diameter of pencils. And these in this picture are at the optimal eating size. And they're very similar to regular green beans. The only thing is they don't snap, so you'll need to use a knife to slice through them. I see a lot of Moon and Stars watermelon being black skinned, but in my experience they're usually kind of green, like a really dark green. This is my best friend's favorite watermelon. Her family grows this every year. This is Territorial Seeds is the website. They sell some that they say are black, and I think Territorial Seeds is a very reputable company, so maybe buy their strain because there actually are a lot of different strains of Moon and Stars watermelon, and they can actually come in a lot of different shapes and stuff because people have saved this seed for such a long time that different families in different areas of the country ended up with kind of slightly different looking plants and different looking fruits. This is Blacktail Mountain watermelon, which appears to have not loaded all that well, but you can still kind of see what's going on here. It does have a dark green to black rind, and the thing about this watermelon that's nice is if you live in an area with a short season or cold weather, this one was developed in Wisconsin by a gardener there who really loved watermelon and hated that he could never get a ripe one, and so he spent a lot of time developing this. So Blacktail Mountain, if you have a short season and you love watermelon. I was looking for Grazini zucchini, and I found this one that it looks even grayer, and it says that it was probably bred from Grazini. It's kind of a dead looking zucchini. There aren't any black ones. There's 8-ball, which is a really dark green, but you know, if you like squash and you wanted something that was a little unusual, the other thing I would recommend is Flying Saucers, which is a squash that just looks really weird, and is a summer squash, so it'll have that crookneck or zucchini flavor to it. And this is a Cucurbita machata, which is really resistant to squash vine borer. If you have that problem, it grows like a pumpkin, so like 20-foot vines, long season, but it stores through the winter. You grow these in the summer, and then you store the fruits through the winter, and that's why they're called winter squash. And I'm actually going to talk some more about Cucurbita machata in the next lesson, probably. This is another one. This is, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Muscade de Provence is this one right here that you can kind of see. And that one makes a good Cinderella pumpkin looking one. There's another one called Long Island Cheese that makes a really nice kind of pale Cinderella looking pumpkin. This is okra. It's red burgundy okra. If you're buying okra, don't get the heirlooms that are not spineless. They're not worth it. I mean, all okra kind of is a little spiny, but then the ones that were not bred to get the spines out, they're just, I don't know why people grow things like Star of David okra and stuff. I've tried them over and over, and I can't figure out the culinary value of not growing a spineless okra. But this is a very beautiful plant, very dark burgundy stems. The foliage can often be very purple or kind of bloody red, and the flowers are just drop dead gorgeous. It's in the hibiscus family. This is an ornamental sweet potato, but I included it because you can eat the greens of sweet potatoes. They're their own thing too, but if you cook them like spinach and stuff, it's very similar. And black sweet potatoes are a really good ornamental accent to other plants. But you can also grow purple sweet potatoes, and you can grow purple Irish potatoes too. But purple sweet potatoes, make a nice purple mash, or you can have a Thanksgiving with some nearly black pumpkin pie, and I thought that was pretty cool. So that's an option as well. And so we get to black asparagus or purple asparagus. This is purple passion. And it's pretty easy to grow. You wait till the third year before you're really harvesting. You probably want to look up how to grow asparagus if you're going to grow it. It's a nice perennial. And if you're putting a lot of organic matter in your bed, it'll do great for you. It also has a really cool ferny foliage when it's leafed out for the year. And then I found this book called Black Plants. I have not actually read it, but the reviews are pretty decent for it. And it's got a black hellebore on the cover. That's a good perennial for shade. And you definitely need to kind of go and look at the plants when they're in bloom at the nursery, or specifically order a variety that says it's black. Hoping this didn't run out. So I think I am going to wrap this up and hope that it works. So see you in class, and see you Thursdays for my chats at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific.